afternoon, good evening to everyone who is watching to this webinar of the International Astronautical Federation that is going to focus on the call for abstract for the 76th International Astronautical Congress in Sydney, Australia, that will take place from the 29th of September until the 3rd of October. And I am joined here by the two co-chairs of the International Program Committee who will engage in some discussions with me to make sure that everybody knows what to do, how to do it, why to do it, and so that we may welcome a large number of high-value abstracts. So let me first introduce my guest this webinar. First of all, Annie Handmer of the University of Sydney. She is the co-chair and will be hosting us in Sydney. And secondly, we have Arif Karabeyoglu of the Turkish Space Agency, who is the co-chair and who will be hosting us next year in Turkey. So I'm going to start right away. We have about 1 hour for this webinar, and I'll run our guest through a number of questions. And you can also ask your questions in the chat, which will be passed on to us by our colleagues at the IAF in Paris, for which we are grateful. And so let me kick it off right away, Annie, with you. Why should people consider presenting an abstract to the IAC this year? Let us know.
What a great question to kick things off. Thank you so much, Tanya. And it's a pleasure to be here speaking to everyone about IAC 2025. I could not be more excited. I think the first and best reason to consider presenting at IAC is to come to Sydney. You can see it's absolutely beautiful in the picture behind me. It's going to be a fantastic conference, and we're really looking forward to welcoming international space community and space enthusiasts to our shores. So in terms of other reasons to consider presenting, well, some of the main ones that people talk about is that you can raise your profile by presenting your research to a global audience of space professionals and experts. You can also get published, so your work can be featured in the conference proceedings and the IAF Digital Library, which has a lot of downloads every year, so it's a great spot to put your research. All presented papers are indexed with Scopus and Compendex and have an assigned DOI number. It's great for visibility. There'll be networking opportunities. You can promote your findings among the brightest minds and scope out new opportunities for collaboration, whether with industry or with universities. And finally, I think just attending and collaborating. Like I said, it's going to be a great conference, and connecting and networking with influential leaders in the space sector, meeting new people, sharing what you're doing, and being part of something truly special, I think would be a great reason to consider presenting.
Yeah, thank you. And I can certainly attest to that. I've attended quite a number of IACs since the 1980s, I have to say, and I missed only a couple. Unfortunately, I missed both ones that took place in Australia, one in Melbourne and one in Adelaide. Those are among, I think, the 4 that I missed in my career. But so I will definitely be there. So thank you for highlighting that, for confirming why we should there. Arif, let me turn to you. What is the expected audience of a typical IAC and of these technical sessions that we are going to host?
Thank you very much. Not as much as you did, but I've been also going to IACs for a very, very long time, more than 10 years. So I pretty much know what the audience is. I've been a presenter and essentially a professional at these conferences. What do you expect is a lot of people from different backgrounds. That includes the government at very, very different levels, very top to all the way to the working level. That includes academic people working in space. That includes industry. Industry has a lot of components, small companies, very large companies, the whole spectrum of industry, and students. And beyond that, believe it or not, a lot of people who are not professionals in space, but IAC is such a great conference that a lot of civilians actually come to this conference, and they actually come and watch what's happening in space, and space enthusiasts, and they actually put a lot of color into this whole business. So when I myself presented in these conferences, I actually saw a lot of my colleagues who are experts in my topic area, but more than that, I've seen a lot of people who are generally interested in the area. So it is a great venue to actually describe your work, explain it to the entire world, that would be a fantastic place to do it. And I'm also looking forward to being in Sydney next year. It will be very exciting.
Yeah, thank you, Arif. And indeed, that is true. And the diversity of the of all the disciplines, and but also of the backgrounds and the ages and everything is amazing. And of course, in the past years or so, we have had up to, I don't know, 10,000 participants. So let's see if we make that number. That would of course be fantastic. But that exchange between lawyers and scientists and engineers and ethicists and medical experts and so on, that is what is so wonderful. And so it means also that going outside of your usual sessions to attend sessions in other colloquia, there are so many sessions and symposia that you can choose from. The richness of this program is indeed really amazing. And so I've attended many sessions of the space law, of the Institute of Space Law, of which I was president for many years. And it's really a pleasure now to be involved in the IAF Bureau in the technical program, also to get much more insight into the richness of this program. Many people, of course, wait until very last moment to submit their abstract. And let me just remind you of the deadline, which is the 28th of February at 23 hours, 59 minutes. And that is CET, Central European Time. So be aware of that. And in the past few years, I don't think we've had any extensions as we did in the past. But still, many people wait until the last minute. Is that a good idea?
Well, I don't think so. Although I have to say, I have been that person who submits at the last minute, and it's better to get it in at all than not. But if you do submit late, and you've been like me doing that, sometimes you'll find that the server gets overloaded with everyone else submitting at the last minute, and you can have technical problems trying to get your submission in. So my recommendation is to not wait to the last minute. Get familiar with the submission system. Do that early and understand it. It can take a little bit of time to understand. For me personally, when I've submitted my first abstract for IAC, I spent a lot of time figuring out how to do that. And I was really pleased that I did it well in advance, because if I had waited until the day of or the night it was due, I would have not been able to get it in on time, because there was just a couple of things that you have to do, and it took a little while to get across it. And I will say, for everyone who's on a time zone in Australia or New Zealand or the Asia Pacific region, I think what Tanya said there is very important. The deadline is on Central European time, not your time zone. Usually that's an advantage, because for us, we get a couple of extra hours on that day. But do keep it in mind, whatever part of the world you're in, Central European time is the time zone for that deadline.
Yeah, and I agree, I am also like you, a last minute worker. I also used to put them in at the last moment. You have about more than a month now, so yeah, why not start doing that, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what makes a good abstract in a little bit, but do keep that deadline in mind and start submitting your abstracts right away. And so, of course, it's important to know what topics we are going to address, what topic areas are going to be included, and can you say a little bit, Annie, about the topics and the symposia, and are there any new topics that we're going to have on the agenda this year?
Yes, very exciting stuff. So there are 200 topics in the technical program, and they're broken into 5 main categories: science and exploration, applications and operations, technology, infrastructure, and space and society. And what I would say is, if you are doing anything to do with space, you will be doing something about a topic that fits into one of those categories. They sound a bit like, it's hard to understand where one ends and the other begins. But when you look at the call for abstracts and you read through the topics under each session, you will understand how they come together and how they work. So please keep in mind that it is very diverse. There are lots of areas, 200 topics. You're sure to find one that suits your research. Now, in terms of new topics, Tanya, we've got a couple. So one is session E11, which is on emerging space ecosystems. We also have session E10, which is space security, stability, and sustainability, which we're really excited about because actually both of those topics really align with our theme for IAC 2025. And then the final one, E9, is planetary defense and NEO, near-Earth objects. And that one's really exciting for people who are very interested in that particular quite niche topic. But there are so many people interested in it that we've created a whole new topic around it.
Exciting. So that's nice. And of course, yeah, every year there are new topics that arise. There's so much happening in space. And so it's almost impossible to cover everything. But with 200 technical sessions, that's really amazing. I'm sure that there is something for everybody. And so, as Eddie said, those 200 sessions are spread over, I think, more than 30 symposia. And those symposia are part of the 5 categories. So you have A, B, C, D, E, as Annie just explained. I'll just repeat it for extra clarity. A is science and exploration. B is applications and operations. Category C is technology. D is infrastructure, and E is space and society. And so it's especially in that last one, in E, that we have as many as 3 new topics that will be addressed. So that is really, really exciting. But then, of course, we come to the big question: what will make a good abstract? What is the best practice? How do you do that? Arif, can you say a few words about that, please?
Absolutely, yes. I've been writing a lot of abstracts and I've been reviewing a lot of abstracts. The key thing about the abstracts is, I mean, obviously from the name, it really, really has to give the idea of the whole paper. It needs to give the concept, the novelty, what is new in the paper, what is the method, the results. It needs to be communicated very well in a very, very short, that's a very limited number of sentences. So that is absolutely critical. Do not get into details. Do not get into essentially interpretations, detailed interpretations. Just summarize essentially what is the clear idea, and then state what is the contribution. As the reviewer, what I'm looking for is essentially contribution, because that goes into the quality of the conference. I want to see a lot of contribution. I want to see a lot of new results, right? So make sure you communicate that in full clarity, and make sure that it can be done in a couple of paragraphs, and you have to do it in a couple of paragraphs. So don't get sidetracked into different details. Just give the gist of it, but also make sure that you convince the reviewer that what you're writing is essentially, you can stand behind it. Okay, so those are the kind of things that we're looking at to pick the best abstracts. That really goes into the quality of the conference. Thank you.
Yeah, that is indeed important, and I've been reviewing quite a number of abstracts. I think last year we had 7,000 abstracts across all the sessions, and of course it's a big task for the IPC, and we'll explain in a bit how this is done. But indeed, you have many examples of bad abstracts and also of good abstracts, and you have a limited number of words. And you really need to get your message across. So don't consider it as an introduction to your paper, but really as explaining what is the paper going to do, what is my message, what is my expected result, how am I going to do it. And so use short sentences, make it very clear, because the people who are going to review these have lots on their table, and so they need to, with a quick reading of your abstract, you have to convince them. So it's not uncommon to have to go over the abstract maybe a couple of times and have a few versions. Don't you agree, Arif, that you fine tune it? So that's also why it's good to maybe start early, that you improve it.
Tanya, absolutely. You really need to start early. Run it by your colleagues who may have experience in this field, writing abstracts for a conference like this. Make sure that you get good feedback, because also talk to some reviewers if you know any reviewers at all, because that's always a good thing. Because as a reviewer, as you said, we have so many abstracts, and we're getting hundreds of abstracts in these sessions, and we want to be fair, but clarity is important. If you're not clear, we're not going to get the message as reviewers. So that is absolutely important. Practice is very, very important. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, you have the 400 words, you cannot go beyond it, but you can also make it shorter. I mean, sometimes you get an abstract of 1 or 2 sentences. That is maybe not enough to convince the chairs or the IPC members, but it doesn't necessarily have to be those 400 words. If you can get your message across in less, why not? Short is sweet, and so really, I think that is important message to underline. But now, of course, we have those 200 sessions, 30 plus symposia. How do you make the best choice? Where do I submit my abstract? Annie, can you say a few words about how to make that choice and selection of where to submit it?
Absolutely, Tanya. It's so challenging. I feel like every time I want to submit an abstract, I kind of look at those pages and pages and pages and pages of sessions and think, where do I begin? But my best recommendation is to identify your keywords in your abstract.
Oh.
So, for example, if you're writing about astrobiology and something about, possibilities of finding life on another planet, what you would look for is those keywords. So astrobiology would probably be where I would start. And then I would just do a Control F find search through the document for astrobio or something like that, that leaves open the possibility of other word endings, so that you can find a short list of a couple of sessions that reference that term. Then I might, if I didn't find enough, I'd zoom out and just search biology, and then go through and find, those ones. And then once I've got a short list, I write them down personally, and then I go and I read each of those descriptions and think which one is the most relevant for me. And I always think the best way to do it is not to think about what's good for you, but to think about who attending this session would be really interested in what I have to say. What am I going to bring to this session by submitting my abstract to it? So if there's a session where, it's about a whole bunch of different topics, that's okay, as long as you bring something unique. So think about, what is it that I contribute with this? You then, if you're really not sure of where to submit your abstract to, you can write to the IAF and they'll help you. So their address is support@iafastro.org, and they can also help you select. And for those of you in Australia, I know many people have sent me messages asking for help, and I've been helping direct people to relevant sessions. When they get selected and reviewed, the session chairs for each session will actually do a search through. And if there's an abstract that they think, this is really inappropriate for my session, but it would super suit that one over there, they'll sometimes, if it's a good quality abstract, send it across to the other session for assessment. And so if you do feel unsure about the different sessions, the different symposia, if it's a really good quality abstract, someone will find a good spot for it. But I do say, that it's a bit of a risk to take, because everyone has a lot to review, like Tanya said. So my recommendation is be as precise as you possibly can. Ask for help if you need help. And if all else fails, just start at the top of that call for abstracts and read the whole thing with a highlighter in your hand until you find the right spot for your abstract. Do you agree, Tanya?
Sorry, I was muted. Those are very, very useful tips, Eddie. Thank you so much. And especially the find function with keywords, I think that is really useful to see clear through that large number of sessions. And indeed, do ask for help and do make sure that you pick the right one for you, because indeed it's true that IPC members, chairs, transferring them to other sessions is happening at the last moment, but often then the chairs will already have, oh, but I'm already full and I don't have any more space. So it's much better to pick the right session from the start, and so do make that selection very carefully and ask for help if you cannot make your way out of it. Now, of course, sometimes people are doing interesting research in their discipline, and they are ongoing in that research. And obviously, February is still quite a long way until the time when the Congress happens in September, October. And so it may be that people are working on something, but they do not yet exactly have the results of their research, for instance. Does it mean that then you cannot submit an abstract, Arif, or is there a way to address that?
That's a judgment call, in my opinion. Okay. So we've done that many, many times. As a researcher, I've done that many, many times. But do not send an abstract in the very early planning phase of your research.
Mm.
You really need to have a plan, and you need to see what's happening, what's going to happen within the next couple of months. That's pretty much it. My recommendation is, if you're essentially doing an investigation, you have some preliminary results, but you still have to mature them. Yes, that is fine. You can do that. But if you're just starting, if you have an idea, that is typically not very good idea. Last thing we want in this conference is actually to people to get accepted and not present. We don't want those essentially opening voids in the sessions. So that is very important. Sometimes you can actually have a very good idea, and the idea may itself have a merit for that presentation. In that case, I recommend, yes, you can come in and describe your idea or method, which is normal, which is perfectly fine, before getting the results. That is essentially describing the idea. But if you're doing essentially more standard work that requires the results of an experimental study, then I say that make sure that you're going to get enough results by the time that you're going to be presenting it. So my recommendation is have enough maturity in your research, or have such a great idea that you need to present it, and all by itself it has enough merit. So we've seen a lot of cases that people are doing research the last minute, like myself, trying to squeeze things in place, but don't do that. My recommendation is very stressful for you, and it's not good for the conference. There is always a next year. Okay.
Yeah, so you see, we can't say it enough. Take your time and be prepared to do it on time. But indeed, so you do not have to have the hard results of your research ready to be able to submit an abstract. And I liked what you said at the beginning. It's a judgment call, and of course, researchers are responsible people. You know yourself whether you have a message, that important message that you need to convince us with in your abstract. Now, when you submit an abstract, you also have to tick some boxes, Annie, and one of them is whether you want to have an oral presentation slot or an interactive presentation slot, or either or one of those. So that is, of course, something that is an important choice, and I'd like you to explain to the listeners how to make that choice and what do these different options mean.
I would be so happy to. When I first submitted an abstract, I was so confused by this that, and I was so scared of what an interactive presentation might entail that I didn't tick it just in case, because I'm quite shy. So I was a bit scared, but now I know what they all are. So I'm really pleased to share it with you. So an oral session is kind of like what you might imagine from a lot of conferences. So you have a room full of people, and each person stands up one after the other and gives a mini lecture for 10 to 20 minutes. And there are a couple of questions from the floor. It's moderated by the session chairs. And it's a lecture style format in a room. It's quite formal. I often say it would suit you if you're more introverted. Interactive sessions are more interactive, as it sounds like. So you present your research in a visual format. So you'll have a presentation that you develop using a particular software, and you can work through it by pressing on the screen, and you can show your research, show your graphs, show what you've done. And it's very suitable if you want to talk through data or show images in particular. It's also really suitable if what you want out of the conference is to have a conversation about your research with a group of interested people, because the people who come will gather around you with your screen while you give your presentation for about 10 minutes. And it's a discussion kind of style of presentation. So as I say, if you're more extroverted or your research lends itself to that, I really recommend giving it a go. Now, they're both equally prestigious. They're considered to be the same level of requirements. They're both as valuable as each other. So for both formats, the authors must prepare a presentation. They must prepare a full paper before the conference, and there's a deadline for that. They have to present at the conference in person. All materials that are presented are published in the proceedings, and there's the same rule for both. No paper, no show, no paper. So that will give you a good idea. The only other thing I'd say about the IP presentations is that they are they have a particular award. So there's a competition for the best interactive presentation, and it's judged on the development that's done on the software, so how creatively people demonstrate what they're doing. And it's a really, really exciting competition to be a part of. So it doesn't apply for the oral presentation. So it could be a good reason, if you are competitive and you want to win an award, to tick for the interactive presentations.
And I think there is one award per category of the Congress, isn't it? For A, B, C, D, E, there is each of them
Yes.
has an award.
That's right, yes.
So that is indeed something that's attractive. And in terms of time, do you get the same number of minutes to present, whether it's oral or interactive presentation?
So in theory, for the oral presentation, you could get between 10 and 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And for the interactive presentation, you get 10 minutes. But in practice, my experience, and I don't know if Arif and Tanya agree, is that every session is usually so full of presentations that it's very rare for a presentation to get more than 10 minutes for the oral session anyway. So it usually works out to be the same. And the other side of it is that, unlike the oral presentation, where if someone misses it, they missed it, for the interactive presentation, they're showcased for the full duration, the whole 5 days of the conference. So if you run into someone and they're interested in your research, you can just walk them over to the screens and show them and give them a special presentation of their own, as well as part of what's happening. And during the conference, delegates can go and click through and look at what you've done. So it really depends, but I would say they have the same kind of level of exposure, but one of them's more temporally bound than the other one.
Yeah, so you actually get a lot of time because your paper is presented over the whole week. And I think
Yeah.
at the last Congress in Milan, we had like 90 screens or something. So it was really, really a lot of IP papers. And I remember when this was first introduced, many scientists and people who were submitting abstracts to the Congress did not want this, and they said, oh, that's for the students, or it's something inferior. And I think the IAF has really succeeded in convincing our audience, our network, that IP papers are definitely not less a lesser category or anything than the oral presentations. And indeed, I confirm what Annie says. Officially, it's 10 to 20 minutes in an oral presentation, but I don't think I've ever seen 20 minutes, unless a session selects one paper as a keynote. They may give that a bit more time, but generally it's 10, 12 minutes or something like that, because we have so many abstracts, chairs want to select about 10, 12 papers in every sessions. And if you have only 2.5 hours, you can only have so many. And then you can also have the risk that somebody doesn't show up, and so you move up. So even the time can also be mixed up. So it may be that people who really wanted to listen to your paper then miss it, and then there is not another opportunity to present it. So I've never given an IP myself. Have you, Arif? Have you ever been giving such a paper? What is your experience or your advice on that matter?
Which paper?
On doing an IP presentation in front of a screen?
I haven't done it, but my students have done it, and they loved it. Because the thing is, you have so many people from different fields and different backgrounds are actually coming and listening to you. So it's not only a one room of people. It's essentially everybody in this very large room, even in different fields, have the opportunity to listen. What I have done is done the opposite. I've actually went and listened to a lot of different disciplines in that very large room of essentially presentations. So I think it's a good idea, good thing, and it actually increases the possibility of essentially having more presenters, right? You can only do so many sessions, but having this format is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and so do remember, it's definitely not of lesser value. It is certainly as important, and you have to have a paper and a presentation. And if you don't show up, no paper, no podium, and you have to write a full paper. So it's really only the format of the presentation that is different. And I'm sure that in Sydney we'll have wonderful opportunities and facilities to have these papers presented. Now, of course, it's tempting. Nowadays, we have many tools, and for instance, artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT or other such mechanisms that can help you write an abstract. So, what is the policy of the IAF on the use of such AI tools, Annie?
It's such an emerging area, and I think the IAF has done a really good job in coming up with a way of acknowledging that AI exists, acknowledging that it's helpful, and also keeping the credibility and what makes the conference special as well. So the IAC is about originality, uniqueness, and high quality science, and that's the starting point. Now, AI tools can really improve things like readability. They can be used for language, in writing, and part of the writing process, part of the drafting process. I've used it myself. It can be very helpful. So, for example, if you need to do translation, if English is not your first language and you are presenting a paper or you're writing an abstract for the IAC, it can be very helpful to check your work using an AI tool. AI is also a really big and growing component of complex calculations, of data analytics, and even a topic on its own. When people talk about AI, there was in Milan, I went to a great session where people were talking about the use of AI for knowledge management tools, and it was fascinating, and it was really interesting. And there's also, so you could have a paper that's about AI. You could also have a paper where the results that you're presenting have been analyzed by AI, and then you're presenting that. And it's all excellent as long as it's high quality. Authors are ultimately responsible for reviewing and editing the abstract, and reviewing and editing their paper, and avoiding anything that's incorrect, incomplete, or biased. And so regardless of whether AI made the mistake in analyzing the data, if you present it, it's your paper and you take responsibility for that. So I do recommend, if you are using AI as part of your process, you must check its work because it's not as intelligent as you are. The last thing to say is when you're submitting your abstract, if you do use AI or AI-assisted technology as part of writing your abstract, there will be a thing that you have to tick saying that that's the case. And you have to disclose the reason that you have used AI. And then the reason that you give will appear as a statement in the published abstract. So if the reason is, used it for translating to English, you must disclose that. If it was part of your drafting process, you must disclose that. You will not be discriminated against on the basis of having used AI, but you must disclose it because it's part of academic integrity, which comes back to the whole ethos behind IAC. It's about credibility, integrity, high quality science, originality, and the uniqueness of what we're presenting to each other, and respecting each other as colleagues. I think that's probably how I would frame it. And I would invite Arif or Tanya if you wanted to add anything. It's a very hot topic.
Arif, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd love to add something. In science and technology, novelty is good. Science is sound science is very good, but everything is about ethics, and you need to follow those rules very, very strictly. Without that, you're essentially doesn't mean anything. So integrity and ethics, those are the two words that you need to follow. And AI could be an incredible help, but as long as you do it within the framework of ethics and integrity, that is essentially the rules that we follow in our field, and that's what I recommend to everybody in science and technology. Thank you.
Yeah, very wise advice from both of you, which I fully underline. Also, myself working in an academic environment in a university, we're struggling, of course, with this tool as educators, for instance. Also, how do we deal with it? Should we forbid it? Should we embrace it? And how do we make sure that it is still the students' work? I fully underline that you cannot ignore the existence of these tools. They can actually be very helpful, but you have to maintain the fact that the work has to be your own. And so I really like that option that IAF has introduced about that statement that you mentioned, Annie, and I think that also helps the evaluators to really assess the abstracts on their value. And again, it definitely doesn't mean that you are valued less highly if you use AI to improve your English, because it only will show that you care, that your message comes across. And so we actually encourage you to use that in that way. But having AI write your abstract, and I'm sure that we've all seen a few of those, it is very clear. And I think it was you, Annie, who said you are smarter than the AI, and do remember that. Do not let the AI write your abstract. They do make mistakes. It remains very superficial. It looks maybe slick and nice, but it is not. So use it as a tool. Do not use it to replace your own intelligence. I think that is a very important message. Thank you both for sharing your thoughts on that. Now let's say you go through this whole process. What happens then with these abstracts? Arif, can you walk us through what are the next steps of this process?
Absolutely. You get the good news from the conference that you're accepted. We hope that's going to be the case for all of you, most of you anyway. Then the next step is essentially follow the roadmap. I've been to a lot of conferences, presented a lot of conferences. IAC is fantastic in the sense that it has a very professionally written roadmap. So if you follow the roadmap, it's going to get very difficult to get lost. Okay, just make sure you follow the footsteps. Everything is fine. The next step, what you need to do is you need to decide who's the main author. That's very important because we're going to be communicating with the main author, and make sure that you select the speaker presenter. That is important because the person who's going to be speaking, presenting, has to be at the conference. If they're not at the conference, you can't really present the paper. So if you don't present, if you're not going to be able to make it to the conference for some emergency, some reason, make sure you let us know as soon as possible. Because as I told you before, the last thing we want in our sessions is essentially holes in these sessions, because that really ruins the entire flow of the conference. And we want to make sure that you let us know as soon as possible. And make sure you understand what are your requirements in terms of presentation. Make sure we have the technology at the conference to support that. Make sure we do it in soon enough that we can make the required adjustments, or you do the adjustments yourself, and then start early. That is very important. Start early as soon as possible with your presentation. Practice your presentation. Your time is very limited. We may come to that later during these webinars, but my recommendation is give the message very quickly and effectively. That requires a lot of practice. So these are the typical steps that you take after you get the acceptance.
Right. And so indeed also to indicate who is the main author and who is the co-author and who's the presenter. But can you change that along the way? If, for instance, the person who was indicated as the presenter cannot make it, can one of the co-authors then present? And how do you do that?
Yes, I think you should contact the chairman and make sure that the chairman knows about the changes. And I've done that personally myself because I had to skip some of the conferences, but I did it soon enough so that I didn't ruin the session. The chairman was notified, chairman made the right corrections. The chairmans are very responsive, I have to say. Once you send them a note, they take quick action and they work with the conference organizers and everything will be set. Things can be changed, we can be adaptive, but you have to do it quickly and properly.
Yeah, so communicate. That is, I think, a key message. Always keep people informed, and that means also if you have to withdraw completely, please do know that we always pick a number of backup abstracts for every session, which may take the place of somebody who withdraws, and that of course can happen. As I said earlier, there's 6 or 7 months in between the abstract selection and the actual congress, but do communicate and do it on time. Now, we've seen in recent years also the fact that some people submit many abstracts in many different sessions. And I sometimes wonder, why would you do that? And how can people really write 10 papers? And you will often see messages on LinkedIn, yay, I got 10 papers accepted. I don't know if that is wise, but is there a rule about that, Arif? How does IAF handle that?
The rule is this. The rule is you can submit as many abstracts as you wish, I believe, but you can, as a presenter, as one person, as one registry, I should say, you can only present 2 papers. So that is the rule, that's the limitation. And there is a reason for that. I mean, because you want to give opportunity to other people, you limit it that way. I think that kind of makes sense. I've actually done 5 presentations at a conference, and that is tough. I don't recommend it. Because you run from one presentation to another, that is hellish. You don't want to do that. 2 presentations is just adequate. One thing I want to really make sure that everybody understands, there are no online presentations. You need to be physically at the conference to be able to present. This is very important for the quality of the conference, because face-to-face presentations, we know that they're much more effective in terms of communicating your message. So the conference requires that you need to be at the podium. If you're not, you don't have a paper. If you don't have a paper, you can't present. So it's essentially, it goes both ways. But that is an important message that I want to make sure that everybody understands.
Yeah, that's a good point. And indeed, I applaud you for having done 5 presentations. I don't think I could do it. But of course, if you have several topics that you're working on and you would really like to share them, that can be a good reason and to pick completely different sessions in different symposia to present them. And you are available to share those results of your research. That can be interesting. But do not do it just to throw in a high number of abstracts, just hoping that one may get selected, because you may end up with 10 or a lot of papers that you will have to write, and that is probably not an ideal solution. We do, and also if you know that you're not going to be able to come, withdraw. So also don't forget that you can withdraw your paper. You're asked to confirm at certain steps in that process whether you will be coming and so on. And you also then, Annie, you have to indicate those different roles of author and co-author, main author, presenter, and what is there not. Can you say maybe a few words to explain why we have these different categories and what they mean?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's important to distinguish, especially if you're putting in lots of abstracts and so on. You might be an author on one, a co-author on another, and so on. So what does that mean? So the main author is the lead author. That's the person who carries out the research, the person who writes and edits the manuscript. The co-authors is anyone who collaborates with that lead author and anyone who makes significant contributions to the manuscript. And I think when you think about the process of writing a paper, it becomes very clear who is the main author, who is the co-author. The co-authors share responsibility and accountability for the research outcomes. So if your name is on the paper, even if you say, oh, I was just the co-author, I don't know anything about it, it's not how it works. You are considered to have submitted that paper and be part of that paper as well. Then the speaker is the other one. So the speaker is the person who is nominated who will present the paper at IAC. So these different roles are really important to allocate. You don't necessarily have to have your main author be the speaker. And this can be important in case, let's say your main author is unable to travel, but you still want to present the research. One of the co-authors is able to go, that's a way that the paper can still be presented. But they do need to actually be identified as being that speaker.
Yeah, thank you. And so what Arif mentioned earlier also is maybe important to underline again, that is, I think, a new rule, that for any registered participants, you can only make 2 presentations, whether it's an oral presentation or an IP presentation. So that is also to maybe protect our participants from having to run from one end of the building to the other end of the building, because the Congress has grown so big now that it's sometimes quite a walk from one session to another. So do keep that in mind also when submitting your abstract. You will not be allowed to present more than 2 papers. Now, and if you are then, as we said several times, you may be unable to present, what happens then? Can I still have my paper in the proceedings? Will it still be published if I have written my paper, but at the very last moment I cannot travel to Sydney? What happens then?
Unfortunately, no. So you do need to show up in person for your paper to be published in the proceedings. We have a no paper, no show, no paper policy for IAC. And what that means is that if you don't write and submit your paper by the deadline, you don't get to present. And if you don't go and present, you don't get to have your paper published. So in-person presentation and registration by the speaker registration deadline is mandatory in order to be considered for publication in the proceedings. And that's what Arif was talking about the process. Once your abstract is selected, there are dates by which you have to do certain things, and you'll receive emails and communications. It's very important that you hit all of those deadlines, because this is a big conference. And like Tanya said, if it looks like you're not going to turn up, then your spot will be reallocated to someone else who will be so excited to go. So just keep that in mind and make sure that you get all of your admin done before the conference. Now, sometimes it happens that the main author is, like I said, unable to attend. In that case, you can have a co-author be assigned as the speaker, but you have to make sure you do all of these things by the relevant deadlines so that there's certainty. You can't just show up on the day and say, oh, I'm going to present that paper. It has to be notified. The session chairs have to know what's happening, because this is a big conference with a lot of people involved, and we have to stay organized.
Yeah, and that maybe also underlines that think twice before submitting an abstract, and do it only if you are reasonably confident that you will be able to travel, because of course you are if you are selected, you are going to occupy a slot, whether it's in an IP or an oral session, and then it's difficult to handle when many people just put in an abstract being unsure if they can attend. Of course, we are always amenable to help and to replace the main author with a co-author as the speaker or whatever. We can make those changes, but if it is unlikely already at this point, do think twice before submitting the abstract, because then as we say, you do take the place of someone else. And of course it's unfortunate if you have written the paper and at the very last moment your boss tells you you can't go, and I have seen cases of that. Then do not despair, because you can of course always update your paper and present it in the next IAC or in another conference or to a journal or whatever. Your work doesn't have to be lost, but this is the way that we have to handle. And we actually got a question in the Q&A here that I see, and that is quite related to this. And I also want to encourage everybody to ask questions. We will move to Q&A in after this. Somebody asked, does it have to be a new abstract, or can a paper also be from another recent conference? Can it be reused? Arif, would you like to give an answer to that?
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that we deal with all the time as researchers. It needs to be new. It needs to be new, novel. We can't really recycle old papers here. So sometimes what we have is obviously science is a continuation of old work. So you can actually have some changes, some improvements. That is acceptable, but it has to have enough new elements to qualify as a paper or presentation at the IAC conference. I think that is very clear. It is the same for any conference or journal. That goes to the ethics and also the integrity. Okay.
Yeah, so in space we want to recycle and we want to be economical, but in the Congress you cannot reuse your abstracts from another. It has to be original work, and that comes back again to those ethical principles that we referred to many times during the past hour. So fully agree to that. Remember also that every Congress has a theme, and this year the theme is Sustainable Space Resilient Earth, and so it may also be smart if you write your abstract to keep that theme in mind, right? To look at sessions that where you can really pinpoint that theme. I don't know, Annie, if you want to say something about the theme, what it means to you, or why this was selected.
I would love to. I think in Australia we are very familiar with the concept that space is really about Earth, that we use space in our day-to-day. So for all sorts of applications, whether it's, just getting around the place, but for us, we're a big country. So we use it for logistics, we use it for agriculture. Space is part of our everyday activities on Earth. And we wanted to draw attention to that for Australia and for the region and for the world. So I would say I fully agree with you, Tanya. Like, please think about the theme when you're submitting your abstracts. We would love to see abstracts that reflect the theme. We'd love to see the conference really lean into that theme. But you can interpret it in different ways, whether it's something about, sustainable uses of space or the use of space for sustainability, because we've got space and Earth there. For resilience, resiliency in space, perhaps that planetary defense from near Earth objects. But at the same time, you've got resiliency on Earth in terms of climate, environment, agriculture, logistics, all of these sort of elements that are key to our societies. So, Australia is a really interesting country. We're really a big landmass. We have a lot of really interesting stuff going on, and we welcome everyone to come and have a look at the way that we've interpreted this theme. But we would love to see how you interpret the theme and what you can bring to our understanding of it as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that must be exciting indeed, to see how people interpret it. And I really, I love the theme, and I think we should always remember that we are on this planet Earth. We are also part of space, and it's all the whole Earth space system is of course connected. So I really like the theme. I see some other questions popping up. One is about whether there will be a deadline extension. I'll answer that very quickly. You should not count on a deadline extension. Please keep 28 February, 23 hours, 59 minutes CET as your deadline. We are not foreseeing at this moment any extension, and of course also remember to not wait until that last moment. Another question is, any suggestions or advice to avoid plagiarism complaints from co-authors? Who would like to take that? Arif, any of you would like to address it? Maybe Arif?
Yes, yeah, plagiarism, that's something we take very, very seriously. Obviously, you really have to make sure that there is none of that in your papers. So that needs to be checked. Check your co-authors, check with your co-authors, make sure that their contribution, whoever is making that contribution in that specific part of your paper, everything is done in a proper fashion. And we're repeating the same things, ethical and integrity, and those are the two words, and make sure that it is done properly. We pay a lot of attention to that. We value that, make sure that everything is done right.
Yeah, and again, it goes to those ethical principles, and always attribute thoughts to the person who you are citing. It's not prohibited, of course, to refer to other people, but presenting it as your own, that will be considered plagiarism, and of course, then your abstract will definitely be disqualified. And the same goes for any papers that you may submit if that becomes apparent. We're coming to the end of this webinar, and I think that we've learned a lot, and I hope that it has been useful for those who are considering to write an abstract. But maybe I'll do one final round with for closing remarks in a couple of lines by each of you. Arif, would you like to start?
Absolutely, yes. One thing I'm going to say is I'm going to put my reviewer hat on. For the people who really want to submit abstracts. A couple of things. Relevance is the first thing. Make sure that the paper that you're submitting is relevant to the topic. If it is completely irrelevant, it's going to get rejected. That is number one. The second one is quality. Make sure that there is enough high quality scientific contribution in there, and we can believe it when we read it. We believe it when we read the abstract. And the third one is novelty, because it needs to be new. It needs to improve our understanding of technology and science. Your abstract should definitely show that. Other than that, I'm really looking forward to being in Australia. It's a beautiful continent. I've never been there, and it's going to be a fantastic conference with Amy. We're gonna hopefully have a really great time doing science and technology in space field. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arif Karabayoglu, for your contribution to this webinar. And Annie, may I turn to you, who will be hosting us in a few months?
Absolutely. Look, I'd just like to say thank you so much to the IAF for putting this webinar together. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Arif. I'm so excited for IAC in Sydney, but I'm equally excited for the next IAC and to go and join our colleagues. So thank you so much. I think in terms of closing remarks on the abstract submission process and all of that, I would say, yeah, it seems like it's a long way away, and it seems like maybe a bit of effort to put in an abstract, but I just want to remind you that Sydney is absolutely beautiful. And how many times in your life do you have the opportunity to visit Australia, to visit Sydney, to hear the silly accents, to go to the beach, to see the koalas, see the kangaroos, engage with our local tourism and our culture? And it's just an amazing opportunity, I think, for the world to come and visit us. It's a long way, and every year it's a long way. Every year when I go to IAC, it's a big flight, and it's expensive, and it's a big undertaking. And so this is the opportunity for you to do the same and come and visit us just this one time, and we'll be so happy to welcome you. And I promise you'll have a fantastic experience if you do come. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie Handmer. That is really very convincing and absolutely true. You guys always have to do the traveling, and once every few years, it definitely should be our turn. And I can confirm that Sydney and Australia are absolutely worth it, and it's an exciting country. I've visited Sydney, and it's beautiful. Darling Harbour is where all the Congress will be happening, so it's right in the middle of the best side of Sydney. And so I hope that will convince everybody to send us your excellent quality abstracts, so that you have to make our job difficult, so that we have difficult choices to make, and that we can help the local organizers to put up a high quality Congress. And of course, indeed, the year after that, we will be going to beautiful Antalya, where I haven't been yet. So looking forward to that too. And it's really nice to have this IPC collaboration between the current and the future Congress. And so I wish Arif and Annie all the best of luck in their heavy task, and I'll try to assist where I can. And I think this has been a good start. So you have now about a little over a month to submit your abstracts. And I think Arif really summarized it really nicely. Concentrate on the relevance, on the novelty, on the timeliness, and start preparing your trip to Australia. Start saving up and look at accommodation and flights. Don't wait until the last moment for that as well. So thank you so much for being with us. Thank you to the IAF for facilitating this, and thank you to my guests in this webinar for sharing their thoughts and their knowledge. And we look forward to seeing you in Australia. Thank you. Bye-bye.